George, it is your turn now.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be with you, and I always appreciate being a part of the work of TEOLOSKI, and I've been part of so many wonderful research projects and publication projects with Professor Kubric, with you, Zora. So I'm really grateful, especially this time, because it's such an amazing uh, theme that you've chosen. Everybody is writing about margins, but but if somebody is writing about marginalism, they seem to be an economist. And there's so much reason to think about how we value the margins, but we don't have any other publication. So this will be the first, I think, really a pioneering work on what marginalism is outside economics. And I'm really so interested in what we can do with this. I'm going to be thinking about it in relation to my work, but there's so many avenues that this could be taken in. My work, I'm going to be reflecting on here, is focused on villages and towns and cities where Muslims and Christians live together, Hindus and Muslims, Jews and Yazidi populations choose to live together in a village, choose to live together in a mahala. They choose to live together in a part of town. So very often, and this is why I'm loving this topic, very often anthropologists, sociologists, literary experts, philosophers who look at this will look at it from a distance. And sometimes they idealize this, and journalists very often idealize it. For instance, the last village in Bosnia where Serbs and Bosniaks lived together, Baljevina. It's so often published about in this, and it's an emblem, a symbol of a life that has been lost. And what is that life? A life of goodness that has been lost. And similarly, in Kurdistan in Iraq, there are many towns, perhaps the majority of towns, where Muslims and Jews and Christians and Yazidis, Shia and Sunni once lived together, but over the 20th and 21st centuries, this common life has been destroyed. And so people idealize that, or, and this is also very common, uh, nationalists are dismissive of this myth, this mythic common life, or they are, and not all nationalists need to be against this, of course. Many nationalists are very positive about living together, but a certain type of nationalist sees this as threatening to a political narrative and sees it as harmful even that people of different religious backgrounds would choose to live together. And so they minimize its importance and they minimize the liberal narratives, the woke narratives, or the cosmopolitan narratives that suggest there's anything good about living together. And so when you have family stories about Yazidis and Muslims, or Jews and Muslims who shared a common life, who shared religious festivals, who shared food together, who shared all parts of their life together, who did things together, who helped each other, who shared a mutual life together, who respected each other's festivals, who respected each other's cultures. There's a positive idealization of this, and then there's also people who dismiss it and who see it as uh, as uh, harmful, and always and very often it's seen at a distance. And what I think the promise of marginalism is to look at what does it mean when you're inside the margin? not not idealizing some distant past, or dismissing the poor people of a village whose marginalism really can't mean anything for us. It's something mythic, but doesn't mean anything for the rest of us. I think the concept of marginalism, it suggests we look at the margin as the norm. We don't look at the margin in relation to our lives, but we start. What does it look like? We start with what it looks like for somebody who is navigating religious difference, linguistic difference, and political difference in a town where people have chosen to stay together. And we can, and you will be able to think of many examples in the region, in Bosnia, in Kosovo, certainly in Serbia, in Bulgaria, in all of these post uh, post-transition countries. There were many examples, and there are now much less examples. And so studying this is difficult. People don't want to share their stories and be shot down or targeted by extreme antagonism. And so many of these stories are treasured in families. And I found this also in Syria and in Iraq. People treasure these stories, but don't share them easily in the public sphere. And so then the stories about what the reality was become reduced to very good or very bad, but we don't have the story from the perspective of individuals who are very used to crossing boundaries, who didn't need to idealize the relationships, but who have had very functional experience of building relationships across, in let's say in Mosul in Iraq, which remains to some extent diverse. There are Shia and Sunni residents in Mosul. It used to be much more diverse. Um, Jews, Yazidis, and other minority communities. Today, it's still diverse. There are Christian communities, much reduced, but to find the reality of what life is like inside what the common life is like in that community, you need to find a journalist or a religious figure who has a language a language and an understanding and experience which allows them to see how people work together. And so there are such figures. There are narratives which say, ah, the Shia and the Sunni are all against each other, and the Christians have been oppressed, and the Jews were already expelled before that, and the Yazidis harshly treated. And yet there are many ways in which people from these different communities retain positive relationships even if they have to be in exile, even if they're living elsewhere. And of course, in Serbia and Bosnia, Montenegro, Macedonia, in Greece, in Turkey, there are many similar stories and I'm thinking of Greece and Turkey in particular, where the stories are very often told as one of conflict. And so anthropologists and sociologists have also told that story of Greek and Turkish villages, which were where there was a common life, where Greeks and Turks lived together and honored each other's and respected each other's cultures and religions. But now the story is told as, why did it break apart? Was it really, was there a real association? Was there some real pluralism, or was it shallow? Was it fake even? Why did they betray us? Which is the story told in many other locations in Kosovo, as well, of course. And similarly in Lebanon, in Syria, in Israel and Palestine. So the story that is there for the telling in Serbia and in the region is an important one for other locations as well, where the narrative has been reduced to a distant past and to a distant margin. So this is something that I know, Zoratza, you and colleagues have a lot of experience with, and I just find this so valuable. What I would like to say is we reduce the story when we talk about positive uh, positive value about in marginal communities. There's a positive value of diversity because they're away from the center. So yes, this is an important reason for looking at marginal communities. And sometimes it is said that communities away from the big cities have less pressure to conform to nationalist expectations. And so we're not surprised when in a small town or a village, the priest and the imam are able to sit together. But of course, these locations are also very intense. They're not far away from pressure. They are very pressured communities, very often pressured communities. And it is very interesting when a priest and an imam are able to sit together and work out realistically how they can forge uh, stronger relationships. We also see in the anthropological and sociological literature negative distancing mechanisms. So, for instance, in Greece and Turkey, where there is evidence of respecting each other's religions in ways that we're seeing still see in the Balkans as well, these these indications of religious proximity are treated in negative ways as primitive or as symbols of anxiety or of resentment, owning the religious tradition of the other by being in the presence of the other. Really potentially very interesting ways of looking at interreligious relations, intercultural relations, but distancing as well. And so I am concluding with what I think is really important for looking at the space where a marginalist works, or a space where marginalism can improve our understanding. So that space is not at a distant margin. The margin is the space itself where people work. It's like a threshold between different domains. And in Iraq and Syria, this is commonly how the relationship with the other is conceived, whether someone's allowed to be at the threshold or to be inside the threshold. And in many of these communities across the world, a Christian and a Muslim, a Jew, a Yazidi is accepted within the family. They're accepted within the culture if they show respect. And so there are ways of understanding an Iraqi family as multi-religious, borrowing someone into the family if they are showing the will to be in solidarity. Um, in Iraq, the communities like Mosul, communities in Kurdistan will describe someone as being within the walls, meaning within the family's walled home. And so traditions of hospitality have many ways of describing the the strengthening of solidarity that happens in a pluralistic community. There are people who know how this works, even when there's conflict, even when there's political strife, and there's a lot of work to be done on it. And I'm hoping my small contribution to this volume will spark interest from others, especially from folk from colleagues in your region, and especially in the former Yugoslavia, where there's so much stories so much work to be done, so much valuable stories to be engaged with. Thank you.
Thank you, George. You are in inclusive strategies to be good for all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Is there some questions? Da li neko želi da postavi pitanje, Đorđu? Vanja, jesi ti, izvoli.
Da, evo. In your experience, does sitting together of religious leaders actually their tolerance toward each other, does it guarantee that people of how to say that people will do the same?
Does it guarantee that that other people will? Yes. So thank you for that. I think it's possible to assume that religious leaders have a lot of influence, and if they make such a stand in public, it will have a lot of different. It will make a lot of difference. I think it is something to be tested, and especially one should not assume it. Some religious leaders will have more influence if their message is one of conflict. And if they say nice things, people will not believe that's really what the religious leader is focused on. It's so interpreting the meaning of these statements is it is difficult. That they come with a cultural code, perhaps. I wouldn't assume, and I'm glad if we don't assume it. I think one could ask if religious women sit together and speak together, will that have more weight? If religious members of a trade union sit together, will it have more weight? I guess when people evaluate the importance of such a symbol, they're asking what is the cost to individuals of making a stand? And if there's no cost, then perhaps the symbol is not very meaningful. I know that people raise the historical habit of, say, in Sarajevo, of a rabbi and a priest or a bishop and an imam sitting together at a bridge, and people would come to them historically and ask for favors or for help. And in some respects, this is seen as a symbol of a functioning society. In other respects, it's seen as corrupt or as meaningful only on the surface. So if today a priest and an imam meet together in a central Bosnian town and they have a coffee together, some people will praise that, and other people will say, "Oh, that's those members of the town elite only care about themselves. But what have they ever done for my family?" Your question is opening many more questions for me. I definitely would encourage religious leaders to make these symbolic stands, but much more so, to my mind, much more important is evidence of a real relationship. And so when the previous pope, the last two popes have had very strong relationships. Pope Francis had strong relationships with Jewish neighbors, Jewish friends, and Muslim friends, and a rabbi and an imam in particular. Pope John Paul II had a very strong relationship with his Jewish childhood friend. And maybe these things can be viewed nostalgically or wistfully, seen as a shallow thing that is celebrated too easily. And that's the case with all religious leaders and all political leaders when they make a story out of a relationship. On the other hand, there can be a real power. There can be a real power. And maybe, I guess, the last thing I'd say is the follower is not just a follower, and we should not just evaluate the followers as as if their leader will do something and everyone will follow. The follower has an agency of themselves, and the follower can influence the leader. If you, I think it's good to open up the our study of these relationships and and when we reduce these relationships to stereotypes, then we'll be disappointed, I'm sure. Thank you. I'd just like to say, I've begun to put examples on a map online, and I've called it the Memory Bank, and it has an address, a web address, which is diverse communities living together. And on the map, you'll see some examples from Bosnia, few from Serbia and from the region, from Kosovo, quite a few, and more from Africa and Latin America, from other parts of Europe. And I'd like to put much more on there. And I'd like to encourage other people to study this respectfully and with interest and to share. And especially I'd like to encourage people to share family memories. But I respect that family memories are like a treasure that can't be spent easily for no reason. So it's actually very difficult to get people to. It's very easy to find people who have family memories who are interested in sharing them, but very difficult to get people to share these in public. And that's similar with the theme that you're raising, Vanya, about the meaning of religious leaders acting in public together. The public sphere is a really difficult one, especially for people who have experience that is marginalized. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Imaš još Vanja pitanje?
Pleasure.
Ne.
Okay, thank you very much, George.
Pleasure. Thank
Welcome.
you.